Welcome back to episode 2 of this tutorial series about the working title CJ4. Contents of this tutorial will be looking at the PFD, the MFD options, and also configuring our flight. How do we import our flight plan and start to set up our aircraft? Also looking at some of the passenger announcements and charts, and also our checklists. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at our MFD controls. So MFDs are multifunctional flight display on here and across the top. At the moment we've got our engines, we've got any error messages which will display across here, and then we've got our compass. Now we can actually change some of the options around here and store our favourite view. So for me, I prefer this view, which could be operated from the lower menu, and you can go from rows, arc, P position or plan. I prefer P position on here, and I can look at this menu, any overlays, map symbols, or anything else that I want to display on here. Some of the options like TCAS and some of the other options are in op at the moment. They are still to be modelled. My second option on here I use for plan mode, and I'll explain about that. Once you've set up a screen and you want to store how you've got it laid out, you just hold down the button with your mouse for 5 seconds and that will store your position. Now, looking at our checklist option, we're going to look at our normal checklist option, so we're just going to click the middle button here to access this. So we're all going to have a look at our before starting engines checklist. So battery switch is on, emergency light switch is armed, and the standby flight display is on. The avionics switch is in dispatch, and the parking brake is set. The wheels and chocks are removed, and the cabin door is closed. Passenger briefing is complete. Our seats and pedals are in the adjusted and upright secure position. Exterior lights as required, so at this point now we will switch on our navigation and our beacon to tell the ground crew we're about to start up. ECAS check, and that was the error messages across here. FMS check and set, which we haven't done, so let's do that now. So on the first tutorial we showed you how to set up the FMC and put in your sim brief information. So I'm now going to click index and next and back to route menu, and I'm going to click flight plan recall. Now if there's multiple names for waypoints, you'll get a list. It will always display the nearest one to you at the top. So Trent. Okay, that's now imported that flight plan, and what we need to do now is click execute. Our flight plan is now loaded. Now I mentioned before about P position and plan. If I click number 2 now, this is our plan mode. Going to click the MFD advanced button and now click the next waypoint. I can now go through in that option my actual route and have a look at the route of how it's planned. You'll see there's no SIDS or stars put in at the moment, and that's going to be our next job. But for now, I'm going to go back to memory 1, which is our P position. I'm now going to click depart and arrive, and I'm now going to be choosing the runways and departures. So for this flight, we're leaving Birmingham at runway 15 on a Leuven 1 Lima. Going to click execute. Now, depending on whether you're flying on VATSIM or not, as to whether you'd wish to set up your arrival, for this particular purpose of demonstration, I'm going to set it now. So I'm going to click depart, arrive again, arrival, and we'll be arriving into either an ILS, or you just put your typical approach. We're going to be ILS 05, and it's going to be a Ribble 1 Golf arrival. And if there's any transitions in here, you can select, which for ours won't be, will be vectored from our final point. We're going to click execute. Now we're going to click our legs page, and we need to look through, because what may happen is you may have duplicate waypoints that are in, so we just need to quickly read through and check. So by clicking the legs page, we can see we are going to be taking off at 146 degrees until we get to 840 feet. And at that point, we will then turn to 147 to 78 and then to these waypoints. At this point, we may have switched on our autopilot, which will fly these navigational waypoints. When I click next, I can see now I've got two lubums. So I'm going to click on the one, and I'm going to click on the one above it, which will drag that up, and I'll click execute, which tidies that up. Let's click next. Now we can see after Ribble we've got a disco. That means that within your waypoint that does not connect to the next waypoint, which means the air traffic controller would typically vector you. What I'm going to do is click next. I'm going to click on this point here, and I'm going to go back and click it into the disco, and I'm going to click execute. And I'm going to go through and keep going through to make sure I've got no more discos. By going back to my plan mode now, and back to my advanced button, I can now walk through all of the arrival. We can see Niska, there's our top of descent point. And we can actually see our arrival we go to Lanark and then into our ILS point. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is talk about custom waypoints. What is a custom waypoint? Well, you may find that sometimes you need to add in a waypoint that isn't there. Now, for example, ATC might say to you, please be at 6,000 feet 10 miles before a waypoint. So I can actually go to a waypoint and mark a 10-mile point and then put a constraint in. For argument's sake, as we're descending, we can see we've got a constraint here of 20,000 at ODG. Our air traffic controllers actually may say, can you please be at 20,000 6 miles before? So the first thing we need to do is click a DG. We can see the track here is 332 degrees. Let's put a slash and put 6 mile point and tap that on top. We've now got a point 6 miles before. I'm going to click execute, type in F200 or put flight level 200 in, and now I can comply with what the air traffic controller said by being at a DG 6 miles before. So the aircraft VNAV system will automatically do that, which is a really clever system. The other thing as well we can do is, if we look at using my advanced, let's get to the approach here. On our approach, we can see if we're coming in from Lanark, we've got a really tight turn onto the ILS, which is going to be a little bit difficult for the aircraft to manage. So we can actually put a custom waypoint in. What I can do is, if we look at the final fixed position of FF05, which is here, I can actually put a waypoint in around here. For some reason, I can't use the CF05 due to a bug, so I have to use either the runway or FF05 or any other waypoint I want to. But let me show you what I mean. What I can do on here is simply type in FF05, so clicking on here. Now I need to decide a track of where I want this. So do I want it at 180 degrees or about 200 degrees? I think would make sense. And if I put that a slash and I want that at 7 miles and I type that on top of CF05, you'll see now I've created a waypoint before CF05 at 220 degrees of FF05 at 7 miles out. Clicking execute, you'll now see I've got a much nicer turn in here. And that's the custom waypoints. You can also use longitude and latitude, or you can use any waypoint that's in the database just by typing it into here. But hopefully that all makes sense. It's really easy. Don't be frightened to have a play with it. Especially if an air traffic controller gives you a command, don't try and manually do it. You can get the flight computers to do it. Okay, So, just to recap so far, we've got our flight plan loaded, we've got our departure loaded, we've got our arrival loaded. The next thing we need to do, and it's a really important point that some people miss, is set the weight and balance of the aircraft. Before you do anything else on the FMC, go into your fuel, set the fuel. Now on my flight plan I can see mine is 995, so we can see 993 is probably the closest we're going to get. And actually our takeoff weight needs to be 6100. We can see on here it's 6409. So we're just going to bring that down to get as close as we can to 6100. There we go, that's brilliant. Now we're going to click our performance button, performance initialization, and we're going to look at our flight level is 280. Our zero fuel weight on the flight plan is 5202. That now matches all of the information we put in. You don't now need to put in how many passengers and cargo because it's taken that. You can see the sent fuel is 992. We can go to takeoff, which is where we can put in our weather. And we can see the wind is 147 degrees at 5 knots. That now tells us we're taking off with a headwind of 4 knots with no crosswind. Our outside temperature is 11 and our QNH is 1011. We click next and we click, there are our takeoff. So we are V1 at 95, V rotate at 98, V2 at 111 and VT at 140. We hit send. That now pushes that information through to the PFD, and I'll show you that in just a minute. Before we go any further, I'd like to just explain what a few more of these buttons do on the FMC. So we have DIR, that is direct. So you may get the air traffic controller say to you, Union 2064, please go direct to Trent. So I can just click TNT and then execute, which I won't do now because it will affect this flight. I'll cancel that modification. As we're further in the flight, we may get the air traffic controller say, Union 2064, please descend to flight level 1500, be at 1500 by a DG. One of the other features of the direct menu is an air traffic controller may say to you, Union 2064, descend to 2000, be level by NISCA. So actually by clicking the direct button, I'm not going to do this now but I'll show you, going through to NISCA and typing in F200, I've already done it, I can just click that into that line and then the VNAV will adjust the profile to make sure that you're at flight level 200 by NISCA, so that works really, really well as well. Okay. We've spoke about the direct button, index button we've already covered. Tune, now this is your radio, so you can tune your COM1. You can also tune, we can click next on here as well. There's your flight ID. CellCal in-op and HF1 is in-op and going back. So COM1 is entered from here. Your NAV1, which is for your ILS or your VOR, is into here. And then your squawk code in here, your ADF frequency into here. Now your TARA, which is mode Charlie, if you like, is in here. And once we start the engines, COM2 is visible on this side as well. Our flight plan. This enables us to, once we've imported the flight plan from SimBrief, this is where it's shown. I think we've covered this as well, the departures and arrivals. Performance. Okay, so performance initialization is where we can come in and put our flight level, our weight, and zero fuel weight. Takeoff. This is where we put in our wind information, and this will give us our V speeds. We can also go to approach, where we put our approach weather in, where that will give us our landing speeds as well. Display menu. So this enables us to put the top of descent point on the screen once the engines are started. Once we take off, you will see that on here. Not going to go through all of these points here because you wouldn't use them. MFD Advance, we've shown you that, where you move through the waypoints on the previous or next or to a waypoint. MFD Data is in-op. You have the execute buttons, you have the next and previous buttons, clear and delete, and your dimmer buttons on here as well. So there we go. That is an FMC overview. So next off, we need to jump in to our checklist again, and we can see what we've done. Now our FMS climate control is switched off. Okay, so starting our engines will be our next job. So we're not online today, but if we were, we would make sure we were clear to start from air traffic control. Throttles need to be idle. I'm just making sure my throttles are idle here. Check. So we'll start number 2 first. So we'll start by clicking the engine start button. We'll let the N2 build up. And when we get to about 15%, we'll introduce fuel. We'll open up the catch and we'll close down the lid, and we've now introduced fuel. So engine start button, check. Run stop, done. ITT rise. We make sure we've got no error messages on our screen, so we'll just wait for the engine to stabilize. Okay, and we're all good. Back to our checklists. Now we're going to do our opposite engine and do the same. So we're going to click our engine start. Right to ANT gets to about 15%. Let's introduce the fuel. And the engine is coming stable, and we'll just wait for the starter to go out and the relay. There we go. So our engines are alive and stabilized. Back to our checklist, and we can now click up there. So now, if we have put on our external power, we need to turn it off. So we're going to go index, going to go next, mod set, and off. That's now done, and we can click that. Okay. Electrical system check is complete, and our checklist is now complete. So before taxi, we now need to make sure that our avionics switch is in the up position. Climate control is now set to normal, and that's important for pressurization. Passenger safety light button is on.
May I have your attention, please? At this time, please comply with the illuminated seatbelt and no smoking signs. Thank you.
So our trims. So if we see at the top, our trim is just outside of the green area. I'm just going to move the trim inside through my trim switch. That's now set. You can also use the switch down here if you don't have a button programmed on your joystick. Right. We can check our flight controls. If they're correct. Speed brakes and spoilers are not engaged. We can also just check out of the window. You can, obviously real wood you can't do this, but yeah, you can see that if I engage them and then make sure they're out. Cool, and then finally our flaps are set, and our flaps need to be set to flaps 15 for takeoff. Set. Hydraulic pressure check, no that's not model, so you can't. Engine anti-ice, we don't need it. Takeoff data we know is set, and we can see it here now because we sent it over. Avionics check and set. Autopilot, you need to now switch it on and turn it off.
Autopilot.
And we've got no error messages, so we are good to go on here. Altimeter check it's reset. You can push B to reset it. Check, and pressurization isn't modelled. We need to check the ECAS, which is, if I turn off across here, we've got no error messages. And the divider doors, that's this bit here. Obviously it's not modelled, so we'll just ignore that. Okay, checklist is now complete. What you can do at this point is go to passenger briefing and do your takeoff briefing. I'm going to do the short one.
May I have your attention, please? We will be taking off shortly. Please turn off all portable electronic devices, stow tables, secure luggage, and loose articles. Ensure your seat is in the
And at that point,
outboard position.
we'll end the tutorial there, and when we come back we'll look at the taxi and the takeoff roll. Look forward to seeing you back shortly. Bye.